47. That's the Kandahar count. I run it every morning while I'm feeding the stove. The names, not in order, they don't arrange themselves chronologically in my head. Lieutenant Aaron Carver, 23 years old. Sergeant Dominique Mills, 31. Corporal James Eco, 22. Specialist Ryan Park, 20. Private First Class Luis Sandoval, 19. I keep going until I've reached 47. Some mornings I lose count and start over. It's 04:45. The cabin temperature has dropped from 52 to 38 overnight. My thermometer reads 38, the one on the wall by the door. It's the closest thing I have to a cop report out here. I'm feeding the stove. The firewood situation is the primary CCIR every morning. Commander's Critical Information Requirements. The same framework I use to evaluate threat indicators for a division of 14,000 soldiers, I use now to evaluate whether I will freeze. Current temperature, 31 outside. Fuel state, approximately 4 days of dry split wood, plus a stack against the east wall that has moisture in it from last week's cut. Wet wood burns wrong, less heat per cord, longer to catch. Weather threat, additional 6 inches projected overnight. Winds from the northwest at 18 knots. Consumption window, approximately 96 hours before resupply required. Nobody dies if I get this assessment wrong. That's the relevant difference. The cabin was built in 1963 by a man named Walt Gruber. He used it for elk season. I know his name because it's carved in the support beam above the door. I don't know what became of Walt. The man I rent from never said. 9,400 feet, Ouray County, Colorado, 11 miles by dirt road from the nearest paved surface. 3 rooms. The road goes impassable after November. I knew that when I took the lease. I was a Lieutenant General, United States Army Infantry, 3 stars. 38 years, 3 wars. Gulf War, Kuwait, 1991. I was a Lieutenant Colonel. My brigade was first into Kuwait City. The objective was taken in 96 hours. Iraq, 2003 to 2005. Brigadier General. Mosul, 82nd Airborne. 11 KIA under my direct command over 18 months. Afghanistan, 2010 to 2012. Major General. Kandahar, 10th Mountain Division. 47 KIA. 312 operations authorized. 8 collateral damage incidents triggering formal investigation. My last posting, J3, Deputy Director of Operations, Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Pentagon. Security clearance that required annual reinvestigation. Staff of 43. Now, Walt Gruber's cabin. 4 days of firewood. A thermometer by the door. The stove has rules: temperature differential, draft pressure, combustion rate. Follow the specifications, the system runs. Deviate, the system fails. It's a completely closed logic, cause and effect, directly traceable, no noise in the signal. For 38 years, everything I operated inside had rules. Rules of engagement. Documents that defined exactly what force was authorized, when, against whom, under what circumstances. Every possible scenario that could be anticipated had been written out, reviewed, approved by legal, approved by command authority, distributed down to squad level. Laminated cards, 4 by 6 inches, in every soldier's kit. ROE for every theatre, updated for every phase. I knew the ROE the way a surgeon knows anatomy, briefed it, enforced it, lived inside it. The puma that's been circling the cabin, large female, tracks measuring 14 centimeters heel to claw. I have no ROE for her. She came within 8 meters of the door last night. I found her tracks this morning in the new snow. Deep impressions. She had approached, stopped, assessed, left. She is running threat indicators on me. I have a 357 in the cabin. I don't have fire authority for it. The situation is outside doctrine. I keep thinking I need to draft a threat assessment. I haven't written a threat assessment since 2018. Mohammed al-Rashidi was my personal interpreter in Kandahar for 2 years. All senior engagements, every tribal elder meeting that required precision, every sensitive site exploitation where the subtlety of meaning mattered at the command level. Mohammed didn't soften messages. That was his value. When a district governor was telling me one thing with his words and something different with everything else, Mohammed translated both. He understood that I needed the full signal, not the diplomatic version. 3 years, every sensitive meeting. I relied on him the way I relied on my S2, as a primary input that could not be replaced. In the last week of my rotation, 2012, I sat across from him in the TOC after the final briefings. I looked at him directly. I said, "Mohammed, I will not forget you." He said, "I know, sir." He believed me. On August 15th, 2021, his phone called my Arlington apartment at 1417. Area code +93, Afghanistan. I looked at the screen for 11 rings. That call was 47 seconds. He left a voicemail. Dari and English, mixed. He says my name at the beginning. General Hargrove, sir. The way he always did when the information was operationally significant. His protocol. He maintained his protocol. The background, people, crowd density, high tension, at least 100 meters of open space between him and whatever was happening, because the screaming is muffled. He says what he says. At second 32, a voice in the crowd sounds like it's asking a question. At 47 seconds, the message ends. I've listened to it more times than I can accurately report. 200 and some. I stopped counting at 200. He was 41 when he called. I don't know his current age. I don't know if that question is still relevant. November 2010, Pentagon. Promotion ceremony to Major General. The Secretary of the Army pinned the second star. I have photographs from that event. In the photographs, I look the way a general officer should look in official photographs. What I was actually thinking during the pinning. A frago I'd issued 4 days before. Route Clearance Patrol, 3rd Brigade, 101st Airborne. My intelligence officer had assessed the route as elevated risk. Elevated risk of complex ambush, her precise language in the threat report, dated 2 days prior to the frago. I assessed that the mission requirements overrode the risk assessment. The window was closing. The patrol went. The patrol came back intact. The secretary shook my hand. I said what was appropriate to say. I thought about the intelligence officer's assessment and about what came back intact means statistically across a career of similar decisions. Some of them don't. The variable isn't always the decision. Sometimes it's just what happens on the ground that day, independent of anything I authorized. I know that. I have always known that. I said what was appropriate to say. The morning walk happens at 0900, after the cabin temperature is stabilized and the firewood situation is resolved for the day. Snowshoes, 2 miles, no fixed route. route variation protocol, habit, automatic. I use the topographical map to vary the terrain. Ouray County, folded and creased on the table. The fold lines are permanent. The granite ridge to the north blocks direct sunlight until 09:30 in winter. 2 hours of blue-grey half-light after nominal sunrise. The light is ambient, diffused, cold, no shadows, no direct lines, everything visible and nothing illuminated with any particular authority. I've noticed something about that. Patrol orders that came through too late always had that same quality. The intelligence was there, the assessment was there, the approval chain was there, but the timing window had collapsed by the time the Frago executed. You authorized the right action at the right time, and then something in the logistics sequence added 16 hours, and the right action became the wrong action in a changed environment. The sun doesn't clear the ridge until 09:30. The ridge takes what it takes. You can't compress the timeline because the mission requires it. Catherine is approximately 60 now. I estimate I know her birth date. I don't track the math closely anymore. She filed divorce papers in 2009 while I was in the second Iraq rotation. I was served by her lawyer's courier. I signed and returned the documents from Mosul. I accepted the Afghanistan command in 2010, knowing what it would cost. Derek was 21. I made that assessment clearly, and I made it correctly, and I don't have additional analysis to offer. Derek is 37. Austin. He texts every quarter. Short texts, no real content. I respond in kind. We're both providing sit reps that maintain communication without establishing contact. That structure was my choice. I don't fault him. Sarah is 32, Portland. She worked for an international development organization with programs in Afghanistan. She had a different map of that country than I did. NGO map, not military map. Different information sources, different analysis, different conclusions about what was salvageable. On August 15, 2021, she called me at 21:43. Her call lasted 32 seconds. I was watching the phone. I was watching two phones, mine and the television feed. The airport footage, the crowd at the gates, the particular quality of chaos that I recognized from 20 years of threat assessment as the terminal phase of a security situation. I recognized every indicator. I had the pattern. I had nothing to authorize. Sarah left a voicemail. I listened to it once. I deleted it. I have listened to Mohammed's voicemail more than 200 times, and I deleted Sarah's after the first listen. That is in the record. That is in my record. 19 months since she stopped calling. I count the months the same way I count the KIAs. Every morning while I'm running the Kandahar names, I add the months. 47 KIA, 47 names, then 19 months. Lieutenant Aaron Carver, 2nd Battalion, 3rd Brigade, killed February 11, 2011, Zari District, IED, 3rd building on compound objective. I tasked that patrol from intelligence provided by a source I had assessed as moderate reliability. Moderate, sufficient under the ROE to authorize. The mission required it. The window was closing. The objective was secured. I wrote the condolence letter myself. Paragraph 1, standard language, the language of the form. Paragraph 2, personal addition. I told his family that he performed with distinction. I told them he died in service of a mission essential to the security of coalition forces in the district. Both of those statements were accurate. I have written 231 condolence letters over my career. I know the format. Carver's letter was formatted correctly. I cannot tell you what the personal paragraph said. I know that I wrote it. I know it was inadequate. They are always inadequate. The format does what formats do. Aaron Carver was 23 years old. I've thought about the fact that he is permanently 23 in a way that no one who knew him can change. I have not found a way to make that thought complete. It just sits there at about the same weight as his name in the morning count. Fatima worked for us in Mosul, 2004 into 2005. Local national interpreter, senior engagements. No formal contractor status. The contracting frameworks for local nationals weren't built yet. She came through informal network arrangement, early war logistics. She was better than the contracted interpreters I had later. She understood subtext. She translated intent, not just words. When a sheikh's words said one thing and his body language said something else, she told me both. She understood the operational value of that information. When my brigade rotated out of Mosul in early 2005, Fatima had no protected status, no mechanism for emigration, no program that covered her category yet. The contracting framework that might have given her a path out hadn't been built. I made 3 inquiries through appropriate channels. The answer each time was that nothing was possible given the current program status. I don't know what happened to Fatima after February 2005. I have looked for her name in reconstruction records from that period. I haven't found it. The records are incomplete. That finding is not necessarily informative. It is the finding I have. In 2016, I testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee on the Afghanistan withdrawal strategy. I was under oath. The chairman asked whether I assessed the current planning as adequate for a responsible transition. I said, based on the current operational environment, the planning is adequate to achieve the stated objectives. I had at the time of that testimony 14 months of classified field assessments that characterized the planning as inadequate for the stated objectives. I had contributed to several of those assessments. They were classified. They were not entered into public testimony. They were not available to the senators I was testifying before. The classified record contains my actual assessment. The public record contains the word adequate. My name is on both documents. There was no ROE for that room, nothing in the operational doctrine that covered what force is authorized when the accurate answer is classified and the system requires you to speak. I did what the system required. I operated inside the rules I had been given. That is what the rules were for, so I used them. The afternoon is split wood, half a cord in 2 hours approximately. The axe handles consistently at this altitude. I've noticed the thinner air marginally reduces resistance, not enough to matter, but I've noticed it. On the wall above the stove, a photograph from 2012, Kandahar, my interpreter team. 7 people in the shot. Mohammed is front row, left side. He's grinning at something off camera. He grinned often. I remember noting that as unusual in Kandahar. I remember thinking it was a good sign about someone's fundamental orientation toward the world. I look at that photograph most afternoons. By the door, the uniform blows. Army blue, brass buttons down the front. 3 stars on the epaulets. I brought it when I loaded the truck in April 2022. I don't know why. 23 months and I still don't know. It doesn't belong in this room. It belongs in a shadow box in a home office. I don't have a home office. I have this cabin. I have the stove and Walt Gruber's support beam and the photograph and the uniform I haven't touched since I hung it there. I look at it sometimes when I'm cutting wood. That call was 47 seconds. I know every sound in that recording. The first word Mohammed says, the quality of the air in the background, the specific pitch of the crowd at second 32. At second 41 there's a pause, approximately 2 seconds, before he finishes the message. I don't know what happened in those 2 seconds. I've listened to the recording enough times that I have theories. I won't list them. I haven't deleted the recording. 312 operations authorized in Kandahar, 47 KIA, 8 collateral damage incidents, 2 investigation closings I signed without confidence in the conclusions. My S2 officer during that period, Major Patricia Hensley, 36 at the time, 4 combat tours, had written the field assessments carefully. They said what they said. What happened in the field said something else in 2 cases. The investigations reviewed both, concluded what they concluded. I reviewed the conclusions. I had questions about both of them. I signed the findings. Patricia Hensley's name is also on those documents. I have not spoken to her since my retirement ceremony in 2018. I don't know if she's still in. I've thought about contacting her. I haven't contacted her. 11 Kia in Mosul, 2004 to 2005. 47 in Kandahar, 2010 to 2012. I count them separately. They're different counts. The Mosul count I carry more lightly, not because it's smaller, but because I was younger and the doctrine was still forming, and I was a different grade of officer with a different scope of authority. The Kandahar count I carry differently. I was a major general. I had full situational awareness. I had the assessments. I issued the fragos. 47 names. 231 letters. 47 specifically for Kandahar in the 18-month rotation. I run the names every morning. The second CCIR assessment of the day happens around 1600, before dark. Temperature trajectory for the overnight. Fuel state updated from the day's consumption. Weather threat, any overnight development. The stove's draw status. This evening, 31 degrees Fahrenheit, projected -4 overnight. 6 additional inches of snow possible. The stove is performing correctly. The draw is steady. I can hear it. The temperature in the cabin is 61 degrees at 1600. If I add wood at 2200, it projects to 45 by 0300. I've run this model for 23 months. The model is accurate. The stove communicates clearly. The inputs map directly to the outputs. I add the right wood in the right quantity at the right time, and the temperature holds. I authorized 312 operations, and the outputs were what they were. The inputs map to those outputs according to something I cannot fully reconstruct from this cabin. Dark comes fast at this altitude and this season. After 1630, the temperature drop is audible. The wood contracts. The stove's metal ticks as the external differential widens. I added wood at 1700. I'll add again at 2200. The stars are visible at 1730 out here. No light within 40 miles. The density at this altitude on a clear February night is wrong-looking. Too many, too close. The distribution not what you'd expect from a distance. The math of why they're arranged as they are, someone has solved. I know that. I can't reconstruct the solution quickly from here. I look at the photograph above the stove. Mohammed, front row, left, grinning. I said, "I will not forget you." He said, "I know, sir." That call was 47 seconds. I've been working out what to do about it for 19 months. I've gone through every available option. None of them are within authority. None of them resolve anything. I don't have a ROE for the problem because there is no ROE for the problem. There is no document that covers this. There is no authorization chain, no force threshold, no review process. 38 years of operating inside the structure, and then one afternoon in Arlington, outside it. The wind over the granite crest has a specific sound, not howling, tight, controlled, like forced air through a passage too narrow for it. It doesn't pause, it doesn't assess conditions on the ground before deciding to continue. It operates continuously, independent of anything happening inside Walt Gruber's cabin. The Puma's tracks are filling with new snow. By morning they'll be partially obscured. She may return tonight, she may not. Her criteria for approach are her own. I am not a factor, she factors for my sake. Temperature, 31, falling. Fire assessment, stable through 2200. Fuel state holds. Overnight threat manageable. The stars don't rearrange for anything. The snow that fell tonight will fall again tomorrow if the conditions require it. The ridge will block the sun until 0930, as it always does. The Puma will run her assessment as her operational needs require. The wind keeps going over the crest. It was doing that the morning the phones rang in August. It was doing that when Mohammed was in the airport. It will do that tonight and tomorrow, and when the road reopens in May, and when whoever eventually inherits Walt Gruber's cabin replaces the support beam with his name carved in it. The wind doesn't wait for authorization, it just goes.